last like 2 chapters of the book, or maybe.
That's 2 chapters.
Yeah, maybe this is the last chapter actually.
What?
Okay, so this chapter is called Las Uvas, grapes. So remember in the last chapter, let's summarize that a little bit. What happened in the last chapter? Ruby? What? Right, somebody stole Esperanza's money. What else? Kale?
Esperanza yelled at Miguel.
Right, Esperanza yelled at Miguel.
And
sorry.
And Miguel ran away.
And Miguel, well, he didn't like run away, but yeah, he left to go work somewhere else, to go see if he could find better work. Because Esperanza was mad. Why was Esperanza mad at like the Miguel situation? Do you guys remember why she was mad? Like why she yelled? So what happened, remember, is the people from Oklahoma came in and they told all the places, because they're so desperate for work, that they would work for like half the amount of money that the other people were working for. Which is really sad because the other, they were already working for such a little amount of money anyway. And now, because all these people are rushing in trying to get jobs, they're like, oh, well, we can pay them even less, right? So, which raises our profit margin. Plus, they were building, remember how they like had each kind of group stay in their own camp, right? Like all the Mexicans stayed in this work camp, all the Japanese stayed in this work camp, all the, and then now they're building a work camp for the Oklahoma people. Well, the Oklahoma work camp had inside toilets and like hot water and a swimming pool, right? And the Mexicans were allowed to go in the swimming pool, but only like the afternoon before it was cleaned, right? Which is kind of insulting. Excuse you? Okay, so Esperanza was upset because now it's kind of obvious that they're getting the short end of that stick, right? They're getting the short end of that deal. Okay, and so she was upset, and then Miguel, who was working on the railroads as a mechanic, got kicked out of his mechanic job because of these people who came in. They don't know anything, but they'll work for cheap. And of course they're white. So the people said, well, oh yeah, you can work in the office or in the work as a mechanic, and Miguel, you go dig ditches for the railroad ties, right? Did they feel that was very fair? No. Okay. And so Esperanza told Miguel that he was behaving still like a peasant, even though he was in the land of America where he should be allowed a chance to get, do better, because he was accepting the poor conditions and everything else. She said, well, you act just still like a peasant. So anyway, so he got mad, and that's when he took off. But also what happened? A peasant, which is like a poor person.
I know what's a peasant.
Okay. What else happened? What about Esperanza's mom?
I know.
Yes, Louise?
She's feeling better.
She's feeling better, and Phoebe? She got out of the hospital. She got to come home. Okay, so, all right, we're going to continue. Las uvas, grapes. Miguel was the only one who could have taken the money orders. No one doubted that. Alfonso apologized to Esperanza, but Mama graciously said that Miguel must have needed the money to get to Northern California. Alfonso promised the money would be paid back one way or another. And Esperanza knew it would be, but she was angry with Miguel. How dare he go into her valise and take what was not his? And after all her hard work. Mama seemed to get a little stronger every day, although she still took many naps. Hortensia was happy that she was eating well, and every day Esperanza brought home just picked fruit to tempt her. A few weeks later, Esperanza... Okay, guys, you're being way too noisy. A few weeks later, Esperanza stood on the shed dock in the morning and marveled at the peaches, plums, and nectarines that poured into the shed. How will we ever sort them all, she asked. Josefina laughed. One piece at a time, it gets done. They started with the small white clingstone peaches, then the larger yellow Albertas. Mama loved the white peaches, so Esperanza set aside a bag for her. Then after lunch, they sorted the flaming gold nectarines.
What are those?
Just a variety of nectarine that's really like a bright color. Later that afternoon, they would still have to sort a few bushel of plums. Esperanza loved the elephant heart plums, molted green on the outside and blood red on the inside. They were tangy and sweet at the same time. She stood in the midsummer sun during her lunch break and ate one, bent over so the juice wouldn't run down her chin. Josefina called to her. Mira, she said, look, there's Alfonso. What's he doing here? Alfonso was talking with one of the supervisors. He'd never left the fields in the middle of the day and came to the sheds. Something must be wrong, said Esperanza. Maybe it's the babies, said Josefina, as she hurried towards him. Esperanza could see them talking and slowly began walking towards them, leaving the lines of women's and stacks of lugs and plums. She tried to read Josefina's expression, whether something was wrong. Then Josefina turned to look at her. Esperanza felt the blood drain from her face, and she suddenly knew why Alfonso was here. It had to be Mama. The doctors had said she could have a relapse. Something must have happened to her. Esperanza suddenly felt weak, but she kept walking. Is it Mama? No, I didn't mean to alarm you, Esperanza, but I need you to come with me. Hortensia is in the truck. But it's so early. It's okay. I talked to the supervisor. She followed him to the truck. Hortensia was waiting inside. We got a message from Miguel. She said, we are to meet him at the bus station in Bakersfield at 3:00. He said he's coming from Los Angeles and that we should bring you. That's all we know. But why would he want me to come? Asked Esperanza. I can only hope it's to apologize for his actions, said Hortensia. It was over 100 degrees. Hot wind whipped inside the cab. Esperanza felt the perspiration sliding down her neck beneath her dress. It felt strange to be riding into town on a work day, breaking her routine in the sheds. She kept thinking of all the elephant hearts that the others would have to pack short-handed. Hortensia squeezed her hand. I can't wait to see him, she said. Esperanza offered a tight smile. They arrived at the bus station and sat on the bench in front. The clerks all spoke to one another in English, their hard, sharp words meaning nothing to Esperanza. It always startled her when she heard English, and she hated not knowing what people were saying. Someday she would learn it. She strained to catch each announcement that was made. Finally, she heard the word she was waiting for. Los Angeles. A silver bus turned the corner and pulled into the bay in front of the station. Esperanza searched through the passengers seated on the bus, but she couldn't see Miguel. She and Hortensia and Alfonso stood up and watched everyone get off. And then finally, there was Miguel standing in the doorway of the bus. He looked tired and rumpled, but when he saw his parents, he jumped from the steps, grabbed his mother, and hugged her, then his father, clapping him on the back. He looked at Esperanza and smiled. I have brought you proof that things will get better, he said. She looked at him, trying to be angry. She didn't want him to think she was glad to see him. Did you bring back what you have stolen? No, but I brought you something better. Then he turned to help the last passenger from the bus, a small, older woman trying to get down the steep steps. The sun, reflecting off the shiny bus, glinted in Esperanza's eyes. She shaded them with her hand, trying to imagine what Miguel was talking about. For a moment, she saw un fantasma, a ghost of Abuelita walking towards her, with one arm reached out toward her and the other pressing on a wooden cane. Esperanza, said the ghost. She heard Hortensia sucking her breath. Suddenly, Esperanza knew her eyes were not deceiving her. Her throat tightened and she felt as though she could not move. Abuelita came closer. She was small and wrinkled, with wisps of white hair falling out of her bun at the back of her head. Her clothes looked mussed from travel, but she had the same white lace handkerchief tucked into the sleeve of her dress and her eyes brimming with tears. Esperanza tried to say her name but couldn't. Her throat was cramping from her emotions. She could only reach out for her grandmother and bury her head in the familiar smell of face powder, garlic, and peppermint. Abuelita, Abuelita, she cried. Aquí estoy. I'm here, mi nieta. How I've missed you. Esperanza rocked her back and forth, daring to believe it was true. Looking at her through tears made sure she was not dreaming, and laughing and smiling and holding her hands. Then Hortensia and Alfonso took turns. Esperanza looked at Miguel. How? She asked. I needed to have something to do while I waited for work, so I went for her. After they pulled into camp, they escorted Abuelita into the cabin where they found Josefina, Juan, and the babies waiting. Josefina, where's Mama? It was so warm, so we settled her in the shade. She fell asleep. Isabel is sitting with her. Is everything all right? Hortensia introduced Abuelita to Juan and Josefina, whose faces lit up. Esperanza then watched her grandmother look around the tiny room that now held pieces of their new life. Isabel's picture on the wall, a bowl of peaches on the table, the baby's toys underfoot, Papa's roses in a coffee can. Esperanza wondered what Abuelita thought of those sad conditions, but she just smiled and said, please take me to my daughter. Hey, that's enough. I don't know why you keep spilling water all over the table, but you're done. No, go throw the paper towel away, put the lid on the water bottle, and stop spilling it all over the table. That's the second or third time that's happened. No. Esperanza took Abuelita's hand and led her towards the trees. She could see Mama reclining in the shade near the wooden table. A quilt was spread on the ground nearby where the babies usually played. Isabel was running back from the vineyards, her hands full of wildflowers and grapevines. She saw Esperanza and ran towards her and Abuelita. Isabel stopped in front of them, her face flushed and smiling. Isabel, this is Abuelita. Isabel's eyes widened and her mouth popped open in surprise. Do you really walk barefoot in the grapes and carry smooth stones in your pocket? Abuelita laughed and reached deep into the pocket of her dress, pulled out a flat, slick stone, and gave it to Isabel. She looked at it in amazement and then handed Abuelita the wildflowers. I think you and I will be good friends, Isabel. Yes? Isabel nodded and stepped aside so Abuelita could go to her daughter. There was no way to prepare Mama. Esperanza watched Abuelita walk to where Mama slept, resting on the makeshift lounge. She was framed by the vineyard, the grapes ripe and ready to drop. Abuelita stopped a few feet from Mama and looked at her. A stack of lace carpetas was at Mama's side, as well as her crochet needle and thread. Abuelita reached out and stroked her hair, gently pulling the loose strands away from Mama's face and smoothing them against her head. Softly, Abuelita said, Ramona? Esperanza, is that you? No, Ramona, it's me, Abuelita. Mama slowly opened her eyes. She stared at Abuelita with no reaction, as she was not really seeing her at all. Then she lifted her hand and reached out to touch her mother's face, making sure that her vision was true. Abuelita nodded. Yes, it's me. I have come. Abuelita and Mama uttered no words that anyone could understand. It was their own language of happy exclamations and overwhelming emotions. Esperanza watched them cry, and she wondered if her own heart would burst open from so much joy. Oh, Esperanza, said Isabel, jumping up and down and clapping. I think my heart is dancing. Esperanza barely choked out a whisper. Mine too. Then she picked up Isabel and spun her around in her arms. Mama would not let go of Abuelita. She scooched over and made Abuelita sit next to her and hold on to her arms as if she might disappear. Suddenly, Esperanza remembered her promise, ran back to the cabin, and returned carrying something in her arms. Esperanza, said Abuelita, could that possibly be my blanket? Did you finish it? Not yet, she said, unfolding the blanket. Mama held one end and Esperanza pulled the other end. It reached from the China berry tree to the mulberry. It could have covered 3 beds. They all laughed. The yarn was still connected, waiting for the last row to be finished. They all gathered on the quilt and at the table. Esperanza sat down and pulled the massive blanket next to her, took her needle and began to crochet the final stitches. When Mama could finally speak, she looked at Abuelita and asked the same thing Esperanza had asked. How did you get here? Miguel, said Abuelita, he came for me. Luis and Marco have been impossible. If I went to the market, one of their spies would follow me. I think they thought you were still in the area and would eventually come back for me. 10 stitches up the top of the mountain. Esperanza listened to Abuelita tell Mama how infuriated Tio Luis had been when he found out they were gone. He became obsessed with finding them and questioned all of their neighbors, including Senor Rodriguez. They'd even come to question her sister, but no one told them anything. Okay, we're going to have to stop there for today, and we'll continue this last chapter on Monday.